NFL will allow 6 social justice messages on players' helmets by Michael Levinson, NewYorkTimes.com, September 5th, 2021. The NFL will allow players to display messages of social justice on their helmets and will stencil the slogans, quote, "It takes all of us," and, quote, "End racism," on the end zones of every field as part of an effort to show solidarity with the protest movements against racial and police brutality, league official says. As the league prepares for the first game of the season on Thursday, the NFL spokesman said that the players would be allowed to choose a decal with one of the 6 messages to place on the back of their helmets. End racism, stop hate, it takes all of us, Black Lives Matter, inspire change, and say their stories. Last season, the NFL also allowed players to display messages such as "Stop Hate" and "Black Lives Matter" on their helmets, as well as the name of Black people such as George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Trayvon Martin, and Ahmaud Arbery, whose deaths have set off widespread protests. The efforts represent a continued shift for the league, which in the past has been criticized for slow to support or hostile to players who have demonstrated against racism and police violence. Almost 70% of the active players in the league's rosters are Black, and league officials have been trying to show unity with those who have demonstrated against injustice, particularly after the murder of Mr. Floyd in May 2020. It is an opportunity to highlight messages that are important to the league, players, and personnel in our communities, Brian McCarthy, NFL spokesman, said on Saturday. We've seen tremendous work done by our players to make an impact, and we can increase that through high-visibility platforms that the NFL provides. Critics of the NFL's decision say the league has no reason to inject social justice issues into football games, and it risks alienating fans. The league's efforts have been shadowed by the specter of Colin Kaepernick, the one-time quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers, who in 2016 began kneeling during the national anthem to protest police brutality against African Americans. Mr. Kaepernick and others who knelt during the anthem sent up an intense backlash by some fans and conservatives, including former President Donald J. Trump, who accused them of being unpatriotic. Mr. Kaepernick left the 49ers in 2017 and has not been signed by any team since. In 2019, he reached a multi-million-dollar settlement over his claim that the league had spurned him because of his protests. That year, the NFL also began a program called Inspire Change that directs donations to groups focused on police-community relations, criminal justice reform, education, and economic advancement. Last year, the NFL said it was nearly tripling the size of its commitment to the program, pledging to spend up to $250 million over 10 years. Amid the protests set off by Mr. Floyd's death, Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner, released a videotaped message last year condemning racism and systematic oppression of Black people. His message came one day after the group of players had released their own video calling on the league to send just such a message and to admit wrongdoing in silencing our players from peacefully protesting. We, the National Football League, admit we were wrong for not listening to the NFL players earlier and encouraged all to speak out and peacefully protest, Mr. Goodell said in his message. We, the National Football League, believe that Black Lives Matter. Last year, the league also honored Mr. Floyd, Ms. Taylor, Mr. Arbery, and others through an initiative called Say Their Stories. Mr. McCarthy said on Saturday that there has been no change to the league's stance about kneeling during the anthem. Players are strongly encouraged to stand for the anthem, he said, but the NFL does not plan to take action against those who choose instead to kneel, raise a fist, or remain in the locker room. We've never fined one player for kneeling, he said. No player has ever been disciplined. The end zone slogans, he said, will be featured during every game, except for those that honor specific causes. For example, during a salute for service game honoring the military, "End racism" will be replaced with a salute to service in one end zone, and "It takes all of us" will remain on the other end of the zone, he said. Lift Every Voice and Sing, known as the Black National Anthem, which the NFL played before games in the opening week of last year's season, will once again be played before the start of this year's season's first game between the Dallas Cowboys and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Thursday, Mr. McCarthy said. A song will also be played at the Pro Bowl, the Super Bowl, and the NFL Draft, he said. George Aotw, a spokesperson for the Players Union, the NFL Players